Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. We had a great guest today, Claire Herring. She was the founder of Blue Ocean Brain and a former client here at Transact Capital. We helped her with her exit. She tells an amazing story. You're going to want to tune in. All that and more, so let's dive in.
Transact Capital presents Banking on Your Business with Jacob Robertson.
Good morning, Claire. Thank you for joining us today, and really excited to have you on. And again, we started this podcast to equip business owners with the right information and the right tools to maximize their exit. We've had some exciting guests, but I think you're going to be one of the best guests and one of the first guests that's really gone through the process. So take a real quick 30-second introduction, introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into a really good conversation here.
Sure. Thanks, Jacob. And I'm Claire Herring. I am the former co-founder of Blue Ocean Brain, a company that was built right here in Richmond, Virginia. And today I'm excited to talk about how my co-founders and I sort of took it from an idea all the way through to fruition. Originally from Raleigh, North Carolina. I've lived in Richmond, Virginia now for about 25 years. So I think of it as my home, and super excited to be here.
Great. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're excited to have you here as well. And so, yeah, I think, let's start the conversation off with, tell that story initially. So the company Blue Ocean Brain, how did that idea formulate? And then what was the, getting an idea and creating a business around it? Talk us through that process.
Sure. So I guess I was a little bit of an older entrepreneur by certain standards, and for others, maybe not so much the case. But my co-founders and I first met at Ernst Young. We were working on the consulting side of the house and navigated with our favorite partner over to Deloitte. And at that moment, we had the opportunity to uncover a missed revenue opportunity available to hospitals. We envisioned, a few $1,000,000 here and there. We actually ran up to a hospital in Fredericksburg, Virginia. They owed the government $2 million, but if you applied the same regulation, the federal government actually owed them $4 million. So for a nonprofit hospital, $2 million is a lot of money. Long story short, it was actually a $4 billion missed revenue opportunity for hospitals nationwide if you apply it both retrospectively and in the current year. And so the three of us, Laura Howard, Gemma Brooks, and I, had the unique opportunity to be entrepreneurs inside a Big Four consulting firm. So we went from an idea to having 40 partners around the country, their teams involved, 500 people in Hyderabad, India, processing some of the work. And through that process, we got the entrepreneurial bug of growing and building a business. My background actually, prior to consulting, was in cognitive science. I was actually the director of neurorehab down at Florida Hospital for a number of years. So I've always been fascinated with how the brain works. And one thing that I discovered at Deloitte, we had a lot of really smart, hardworking people, but two things. One, nobody had time to invest in their own personal development outside of mandatory training or mandatory conferences. And then two, the way that the brain learns best is in shorter doses, right? Versus these sort of hour-long or, multi-hour sessions. And so we did not see that as a training opportunity available in the market. And together we began talking about the idea of creating a micro-learning solution for corporate America. There were a couple years there. So micro-learning, when you think about in the corporate world, was not a concept people had ever heard of before. And so there was no money in the budget. So a couple years were spent sort of educating the market, right? Fortune 500 companies liked the concept. In fact, Starbucks Corporate was one of our first buyers because I think they were future focused in terms of the world of learning. So we took a few years really to find product market fit where we were selling. Fast forward, we have 10% market penetration in the Fortune 500. Mid-market, is definitely on board. So now, maybe by 2017, we were starting to see, a recurring revenue pattern. The sales process was more consistent. We were investing in growth of our people. So we went from a team of 5 to a team of 15 to a team of 30. And even though we knew exit was a possibility, and I think in the back of our minds, the idea of, selling to a strategic at some point in the future was exciting, we pushed that off at that moment more as like just kind of a wonderful idea for down the road. I I really don't think it was until 2019 that we started having serious conversations. And just from a timeline perspective, we ended up selling at the end of 2021. So a full 2 years in advance, we started having those, more serious reflections and conversations about what to do next.
Okay, yeah. And so as those conversations begin, did you see changes? What obviously the word changes, that there had to be. What were the emotions and the thought processes at that point of, you're trying to still run and grow a company, but at the same time you're position it to sell. So kind of walk me through from your point of view, were the biggest impacts that you saw at that time?
So, from a revenue perspective, you're always looking for that hockey stick moment, right? You're wanting to carry the momentum forward. And
Right,
when we
right.
started to see that occurring, I think that we felt like we weren't sure if we, the three of us, and the team that we had could grow it fast enough. Now, along our trajectory, we did not invest in a ton of internal infrastructure. So we actually continued to outsource our IT. Um, we had a fractional CFO, and so we were heavily focused on customer service, sales, and product development. And at that point, we really felt like we had the opportunity to turn that into, $100 million business. And so we thought that looking for some strategic partners to help us do that made sense, and would also be sort of a culmination for us of, how big what we thought was a great idea could become.
Walk me through what led to, that partnership.
Sure.
How did you find us, and what really stood out as some of the most impactful and positive aspects of that?
I didn't know anyone directly at Transact, but they had such an outstanding reputation here in the community that I had several people make that as a suggestion and an introduction.
Okay.
Um, the initial conversation was great. We talked to Patrick Morin. He took a genuine interest in understanding the business. He also was able, in a really humble and sort of just enjoyable, humorous way, to instill in us a lot of confidence in him. He knew his business. He asked really smart questions, some of which we'd not even considered yet in terms of what we thought our next steps would be. So we saw Transact as kind of an educational partner for us right out of the gate.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Great to hear. I agree. Yeah. And that's one thing we really try and pride ourselves on and focus on is, there's a skill set in growing and running a business, and then there's a skill set in exiting the business and achieving that exit. So, from your point of view, I'd like to hear, what were the things that after you started to talk with Transact and Patrick, what were the changes in how you perceive the business, and what did you focus on and say, okay, these are the items that are really going to maximize our exit versus, things that we, hadn't thought of before. So yeah, kind of walk me through that from your point of view. After that meeting, after you started to interact with Transact, what were the things you started to hyper focus on to maximize that exit?
Sure. One of the things that we needed to get done right out of the gate, and this was Transact's advice, was to go ahead and do an initial valuation. And depending on the maturity of a company's business, that number could be more stable. In the case of Blue Ocean Brain, we were growing rapidly. So Patrick recommended a valuation, and then we actually did a second valuation 6 months later,
Okay.
which
Okay.
changed significantly. There were also some other conditions in our external market which were really favorable. So during that time, the advice we were given were to, look at our revenue streams. He helped us to understand how we would be valued if we were to sell. He asked us some important questions about potential strategic partners that might take an interest in buying us. And then he brought to the table some ideas around financial partners that could take an interest. And so there was that 6 month window between valuation one and valuation two, which allowed us to kind of hone our focus, look at our revenue streams, and we were thrilled 6 months later, at where our valuation sat, and we were ready to go ahead and try and make a bold move and take it to market. And at that point, we were in good hands, and we'd never gone to the table before. It was our first and only time. So having someone sort of walk us through what each step was really wasn't scary. Now, don't get me wrong, behind the scenes between the three of us, there were some intense conversations, but they were mostly positive, right? It was, how to make the right decisions, what to do, how to ask good questions, and the whole bucket of what you don't know. Those were the kinds of things I think we stressed about the most.
Yes, yeah, and that's great to hear. And so, as you go through that, was there a point when it became to feel real? Like, wow, this company that I started, from the early days of just fighting every day to get a foothold, to now, wow, an exit is on the horizon.
Mhm.
Was there like a singular moment that stood out to you of like, wow, yeah, this is actually happening? And what were the emotions behind it at that time?
Sure. I think the amount of interest from the market we received once we sent, and what's it called, the SIM book?
Oh, the SIP,
The
yes,
SIP, yeah,
yes. Yeah.
that goes out there, and then just, the fact that dozens of organizations were signaling a certain amount of interest. We didn't know how normal or unusual that was. And that's another way I think Transact helped, is you all were able to benchmark for us. This is a very positive sign relative to other things that we've seen. It started to get real then. We ate a lot of steak dinners with a lot of organizations that flew in to have conversations with us. That felt real. Having spent a number of years in Big Four consulting, I think made some of those meetings and conversations easier, just because all three of us had kind of lived in a world where you were constantly having to state your case and take it through due diligence on behalf of someone else. Now you were doing it for yourself. But then I felt like things accelerated, right? So this all started in June when the book went out, and we were able to close by late November. So that's a pretty fast process for us. It
Right,
felt
right.
real every single day. There were a few twists and turns, but the other thing that was helpful to have guidance on was, we did some due diligence on our side under your advice. And so we were so buttoned up. There were really no surprises on our end, that when people asked the questions coming from the potential acquirer, we were ready for those questions.
Great, yeah. And so, yeah, that's awesome to hear. And so, the next question is, when a lot of people think about exiting their business, they think it's the book is open one day and then they close it and then they walk away from it.
Yeah.
And that's a reality for some people. But, if you go on the Blue Ocean Brain website today, you're still on there. And so kind of talk us through, and I'd be curious to hear from, all the partners, what was your exit reality? What actually happened when the sale was complete, and how involved were you, and how involved were the partners, and what's the future look like?
Sure. And I just want to say, for anyone listening, I realize that conditions are different every time. And I do believe timing is everything. And so, with all humility, timing was really in our favor. And what I mean by that was the terms of the sale were mostly in our court in terms of what we would do after. And again, with three co-founders, everyone had a little bit of a different preference. The most important thing was our people. So we wanted to make sure that the acquirer we selected was going to take great care of our people. And we knew on our end that meant we wanted to stay behind for a period of at least several months to make sure when that turn occurred that things went well. Long term, we had one partner who was ready to retire. We had another one, again, 17 years in age between the three of us. We had one who has elected to stay on with the organization and actually, participate in sort of the next phase with them. And then I sit in the middle. I was full-time for the first year after sale, which was my choice. And now I've moved into a fractional role, and I'm really only working 5 to 10 hours a week as an advisor to the acquiring company. And I love that, right? Because I'm still young, and I'm still excited about what the company's doing. And
Yes, yeah.
so it is possible to have sort of a hybrid way forward. I think for anyone going through the process, asking the questions, right? Trying to understand what your acquiring company wants, but also what you want, and not being afraid to speak up and sort of communicate and have that conversation while you're working out the terms, assuming the timing is in your favor.
Great. Yes. Yeah. And congratulations. I mean, that's
Thanks.
great to hear for all three of you. So as we think about walking away and some final pieces of advice or insights, again, focusing on this audience, say they're 2 to 4 years out, it's in the back of their mind. what would you say if you had to boil it down to one or two, key points that they could take away? What are those key points from your point of view?
Sure. And hindsight is always 2020. So that's,
Right. Yes.
it's nice
Yeah.
to be sitting on this side of it. My feelings for people who are going through it on the front end. Um, you have to think about what is the value of your organization. Certainly there is, recurring revenue, and that will always be a focus. But your people are often your greatest asset. And an acquiring company, depending on what they plan to do with you, is going to pay a lot of attention to that. So I would consider a 2 years out, really taking stock in opportunities for growth and development for the people that you have on the team, taking a review of the things that are in-house for your organization versus maybe things you're outsourcing from an infrastructure standpoint. And then also being clear about the type of revenue that you're bringing in, right? And how that lines up with other organizations like you. Finally, I think you have to look in the closet, whether it's tech debt or, maybe you need to clean up some of your financial reporting. It's never too early to start on some of that, and it's going to make it a much smoother process, and you have a much higher likelihood of going all the way through close by doing a lot of your housekeeping early. Unfortunately, I have one partner in particular, Gemma Brooks, I think, who did a stellar job helping us with that. But certainly Transact held our hand through the whole process.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's great to hear. And so yeah, I mean, what's the future look like for you? Any exciting plans as you look forward?
Sure. I am on the board of Lighthouse Labs, which is an accelerator based in Richmond, Virginia, helping other entrepreneurs grow their organizations. And that is something I've done for several years. That's exciting. I enjoy that. I still have two children, one in college, one in high school. And I'm enjoying those last couple years of high school. My husband and I are both kind of taking a deep breath in and out before we decide on what we might like to do next. But I am really glad that I kept a toehold in Blue Ocean Brain and get to continue to support and help in areas where I have passion and ability, because that's just fun stuff, right? That's why we did it. And I think companies today more than ever need to continue to invest in developing their people. And I still truly believe Blue Ocean Brain is the solution that can help organizations do that.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, and exciting. So, well, best of luck to you. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Jacob, and really appreciate all the work you and the team at Transact did.
Oh yeah, happy to help. So, thank you.
Transact Capital presents Banking on Your Business with Jacob Robertson.